The SA Human Rights Commission says last month's incidents of unrest raised concerns about the state's ability to protect the public from harm. It says government's ability to alleviate poverty was also questioned. Unemployment and poverty are understood to be influential factors that fuel the unrest. The Commission announced it will be instituting hearings into the violence that swept through KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, with proceedings expected to commence within the next 3 weeks. We're joined by Commissioner Chris Nissen to discuss this further. Commissioner Nissen, good morning. Good to speak to you. Now, we understand that an Imbizo was recently held to establish some of the challenges. What came out of this Imbizo?
Well, thank you so much, and good morning to all the viewers of Newzroom Afrika, and thank you for always inviting the South African Human Rights Commission as your partner in establishing a realization of rights of our people. What came out of the Imbizo was to look at understanding very clearly that on the one hand you have the South African Police Service and law enforcement agencies that must look at the criminal activities and intent what happened. At the same time as the Commission, we're looking at we ask the question, what went wrong and what is there that we can do, and how do we help and work with the different civil society organizations and the communities in order to make people accountable for what happened in terms of all the racial issues, and secondly, how do we bring about healing and how do we build social cohesion within those communities. Hence, we've been asking for a national hearing in which we'll invite all to come, all the interested parties to come and share with us in order for us to make a recommendations as to how we can A, keep people accountable, and B, how we can assist in social cohesion and healing. We will be meeting on Tuesday as the Commission to further discuss this matter.
Now, when you held the Imbizo, it was obviously to establish if there was need to have the hearings. Now, what is some of the information that came out from the Imbizo that's obviously put you on course to have these hearings?
Well, the part of the issues is we're looking at human rights violations. The human rights violations in terms of the fanning of racism, the racial insults, the complaints that we receive from across the board by different people and institutions regarding racial insults and racial comments and so on. That we'll be looking at, but we'll also be looking at some of the issues that underpins all of the issues such as the inequality, poverty, and of course unemployment, and look at the issues about socioeconomic rights.
Commissioner Nissen, you were in KZN recently, and you've obviously had a first-hand look at the impact of all of this. Take us through what your observations were.
Well, you know, if I can just make two ones. One is that, you know, when we went to Pietermaritzburg, obviously 70 structures were burned down. 4 people died, including a 17-year-old, and his mother was describing it in graphic details how he was gunned down in front of her. But the good thing was that, you know, that the people of Northdale, the community of Northdale, came to the assistance, the religious institutions, the local councillor and other organizations came and assisted that community to the extent where I think it's a good model for understanding what can rise out of the ashes, and people obviously have rebuilt and they assisted rebuilding the structures of the people. However, we still say that we need to have the investigation, because in Sobantu, a bus depot was gutted. In Eastwood, a whole industrial area of small business were gutted. And so we say we will still have that hearing, and for us to understand. If we go to Phoenix and the other areas, we have engaged with the committee established by the Minister of Police, Mr. Tele, the forum. So in Maritzburg, you had the Peace and Development Forum. In Phoenix and surroundings, you had the forum of the different representatives from the informal settlement to the formal settlement. And people are hard at work in trying to, deal with the issues, what happened, in a very open and frank manner, and say what's it that you need to do to go forward in building social cohesion and bring about hearing. Obviously, the deaths that occurred, the police must continue with its work. We've engaged all the stakeholders, and we're quite happy to say that we believe that that whilst life has been lost and that justice needs to be done, at the same time we've got hope that we will make a turn in social cohesion within those different areas.
Commissioner Nissen, how are you reaching these people that you're hoping to hear from, firstly? And secondly, in what form will these hearings take place?
Well, if the hearing continues, and we'll discuss that on Tuesday, the hearing will involve investigation by our officers both in Gauteng and in KZN. And secondly, the complaints that we receive, we need to analyze, assess those complaints and involve those people. Two, we will also ask people to make written reports or written telling us of what they believe, what happened. And also we can have oral presentations. And therefore we will also invite not only the ordinary people, but we'll also invite the government institutions that will either have been involved or should have been involved in the greater issues of unemployment, poverty, and inequality.
Now, I'm interested in how you will access these people, or how these people will have access to you, because one of the things that we're talking about right now is poverty and disposable income. And a lot of people are out of jobs, but nonetheless, these individuals will have complaints they'd like to make. Are you easily accessible? Will it not put a strain on their pockets any further?
Well, the people, we will probably go to some of those communities. The hearing will not take place in one center, but we will go to those communities. We'll also invite those communities where, the stakeholders to come to us. And so we will take in consideration all of those factors so that, there are people that lost lives, the family members. We have to talk to people who were profiled. We have to talk to people who needed to defend, who thought that they were under siege. All of those people will have to go to those communities, and at the same time we'll invite those stakeholders and civil society that can come to our hearings.
Now, what's also clear is that racial tension seems to have erupted or surfaced. So clearly it's been there all along, 27 years after South Africa's freedom. Does this concern you, firstly? And secondly, does it provide an opportunity for you to look at other communities across South Africa where race relations are an issue and deal with them before we have the scenes that we had in places such as Phoenix?
Indeed. I think what has happened, and obviously we condemn the violence, we condemn the racial insults, is a wake-up call for South Africa. It's a wake-up call not only for KZN or for Gauteng, but it's a wake-up call in terms of where are we with our Rainbow Nation dream, and where are we with regard to race and racism in this country. If you look at our annual trends, you'll see that racism is one of the top complaints that we receive from the South African community. And therefore it's very important that we need to tackle this and say that the South African Human Rights Commission needs to be involved and needs to mobilize the broader society in order to fulfill our mandate to say that we'll build a culture of human rights. And the culture of human rights in the Republic of South Africa means that social cohesion and anti-racism.
Now, you talk about racism being one of those top 10 complaints. I'm going to hop on in a little bit. What measures have you been putting in place to deal with it prior to this? Obviously, if it's one of the top 10 complaints, it means that it's one of those things that's firmly embedded in our society.
Obviously, racism is one. Inequality, or the issues about inequality, the issues about, some of them also from the socioeconomic rights which are there, and it is access to schooling, access to water, housing, water, sanitation. Those are the kind of rights that violations, complaints that we receive from across the spectrum, across South Africa, in our 9 provinces where our officers are dealing with this. Municipalities are one of the biggest culprits as well in terms of water, sanitation, and of course evictions is another one. So those are the kind of complaints that we receive as the Commission. and we're dealing with it in all the provinces, and sometimes in one province there'll be a higher complaints on some of the issues, whereas in the other provinces, depending on the nature of the complaints in those provinces. But our staff, women and men, are working around the clock to deal with those complaints.
How are you actually dealing with specifically the issue of racism?
Well, you see, the issue of racism, I don't think in this country, and that's my opinion, we haven't effectively dealt with the issue of racism. And racism across the board. And I think what we're seeing is that the social cohesion project of South Africa, of the Republic of South Africa, has been seen, has taken a backseat. And I think all of us South Africans need to put that front on the agenda of South Africa and say, as South Africans, how do we work together? How do we continue to live as South Africans and contribute to a society where we can make South Africa work for all of us?
Now, I can only imagine that what's happened has further entrenched that divide. But finally, before we let you go, Commissioner Nissen, in 3 weeks you will commence with the hearings. How long do you expect these hearings to go on for?
Sorry, just repeat that. My apologies.
I said you're starting the hearings in 3 weeks' time, from what we understand. How long do you expect the hearings to go on for?
Well, we are busy preparing the terms of reference, and we'll also incorporate what the President has asked us, and we're also mindful of the other commissions of inquiries or inquiries that will happen. We obviously want to have it done as soon as possible, but we cannot just rush into it. So we will have to look at our investigation, look into our engagement with the different communities. We have to take our time, but be quick. We cannot be let this hearing, when it takes place, take a long time, because I think people need answers and people need solutions. And part of that is to say, how do we then put in a sustainable program of social cohesion, particularly in those communities where there were racial tensions.
Commissioner Nissen, thank you so much for your time this morning. We've just been speaking to Commissioner Chris Nissen from the South African Human Rights Commission. And one of the things that he's said is abundantly clear is that the issues around racism still remain prevalent in South Africa.